from Studio 67 in Florida's capital county, it's time to get fact-checked.
Access granted.
What is up, good people of Florida? You already know who it is. It is Jared, Courtney, Amir, and Peter back with another episode of Fact Check. Quick roll call. How was everybody's week 3?
Man, it was aggressive. And it is still aggressive. It's only Thursday.
I know.
Time of recording.
Courtney, how about you?
We're here.
We are still here. There are only 43 days left of session, but who is counting?
Not us.
We had a big week this week. Among other things, it was FAC Day, so we had a couple hundred commissioners, I believe, in town, actually, who joined us at the Challenger Learning Center for a morning legislative briefing. I made my way to the Capitol pretty quickly because I got kicked out of Space Camp there back in the day. I might still be trespassed, posters up on the wall, that sort of thing. Who knows? But we had a lot of our state leaders come through and address our commissioners and all the county staff that were able to come join us as well. And we got some really positive feedback from some of the speeches we heard. In addition to FAC Days, we had several individual counties come through for their county day. And then it was also small and rural county days this week. So, those guys set up camp in the courtyard and were kind of showing off what makes their county special. I ate, entirely too much strawberry shortcake, as well as, some good oysters. Union County had some fresh sausage. And then Gadsden County had their signature cigars, so I pocketed a couple of those. Maybe we can break those out and celebrate a big, next time we kill a bill. But appreciate all our commissioners and county folks who were able to make the trip this week. I think it makes such a difference, when folks can, hear people from their delegations talk about what matters at the local level. You guys are the boots on the ground, and so you know exactly what you're seeing. You're the ones who are ultimately going to have to implement a lot of this policy. Now, as I mentioned, Ledge Day could not have come at a better time. We had a couple dozen commissioners come through for the term limits bill that was up in the House this week after getting temporarily postponed last time around. Courtney, how did that go?
The room was jam-packed full of all of our county commissioners, and we are so thankful for them coming and testifying. They all had their unique individual stories of why proposing this on the ballot for statewide initiative is not the appropriate way to do this, and this is the battle that we are fighting this year.
And I think that's the point we were really trying to drive home, Courtney, is that, number one, this already exists in the form of just elections. That is a term limit in its own right. I believe someone who went up there, shared some statistics that, over half of the incumbent county commissioners last cycle were ultimately replaced by a new member.
Yeah, we did lose a lot of commissioners last year, and we have some glorious new faces to welcome in. And
the second point that I think everyone was trying to make here is that, if this thing goes to the ballot, it really needs to be on a county-by-county basis, I think. There's no reason why, let's say, Miami-Dade County should be making a decision for Union or Liberty or Suwannee.
Right. We just want everyone to make their individual choices with the constituents in their area, not one county picking for another.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, Courtney. This one did pass its first committee this week, but we're hoping that thing, gets put in a drawer and forgotten about like it did last year. So we will keep you guys updated on that one. But with that being said, we will move on to the rest of our schedule for this week.
To kick it off early this week, we had 1118 by Senator McClain up. This is known as the Ag Enclave Bill.
But it is so much more than that, right, Courtney?
It is so much more than that. This includes impact fees and definitions for infill and minimum lot size requirements. Before committee, there was a delete all amendment, and then an amendment to the delete all amendment that actually removed the provisions for residential infill development and requiring minimum lot sizes and maximum density. So we are happy about that. What makes this so controversial about the Ag Enclave? One of the biggest parts of this bill is the definition of Ag Enclave that's getting changed. Currently, to develop a piece of agricultural land, 3 sides of it have to be developed. Currently, to get that last piece to also be developed, they are changing that to 50%, so only 2 sides have to be covered. with
Right,
development.
and that did have a size threshold. It was for, ag lands that were, totaled under, I think, 640 acres.
Yeah, so
if
they've
I'm not
also bumped that
mistaken.
up to 700 acres now.
It's up to 700 acres. But yeah, essentially the idea is if you've got agricultural land and all the neighboring areas are developed, it makes it a lot easier to develop that ag land as well. Now that we're cutting it down to two sides, that's obviously lowering that threshold. And kind of keeping it in that vein, Courtney, we saw another bill this week that's actually a positive development for counties. You may recall the preemption of solar facilities on agricultural lands from back in 2021, a couple years ago. And essentially it made solar projects a permitted use by right on all agricultural lands, which preempted the county process of siting these projects. We got a bill from Senator Bradley, it's Senate Bill 1304, that would actually repeal that part of statute now and kind of give counties some input back and just give them a little more voice to, let's say, balance their communities. We did have a couple commissioners come through and testify on that from Gilchrist County, Columbia County, and Clay County. I hope I'm not forgetting anybody. But the overwhelming majority of these solar projects do get approved anyway. But it is nice to have kind of that county backstop as far as siting these facilities. And so we appreciate our commissioners that came out and spoke on that one. And we'll see where this thing goes from here. Amir, you got anything for us?
Yeah.
You had a big one this week, right?
Yeah, we had HB 1535 up on Tuesday. It passed favorably in this committee. This was the EM package, but the House's version. So last pod, we talked a little bit about the Senate version of this bill. Now we're talking about the House companion, which also experienced a delete all amendment the day before its committee to align it more closely to SB 180, still holding some of its own original provisions though. Some of those provisions include setting a 1-year look back period for homeowners as it pertains to the National Flood Insurance Program. It also requires counties and municipalities to develop post-storm permitting, as well as prohibiting certain fees on replacement structures during rebuilding post-emergency, and outline specific EM roles for local governance, including mandatory training for officials as well. We recently just met with the bill sponsor, Rep. McFarland. She was very pleasant and very open to continuing the conversation on, working this bill into the best posture possible. Again, part of why Florida leads the way in emergency management is because we're tested time and time again. And after being battle tested so long, we come back to the legislature with things that worked and things that we feel like could make processes a little bit better. So very excited to see how this bill moves and grooves through the process.
Amir, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, we obviously have, a great need to meet as far as these storms that, plague our state year after year. And so I think we really need good policy in this space and appreciate you kind of updating us on that one. Pete, what's going on with you, man?
Yeah, so on Monday, HB 11 by Representative Felicia Robinson cleared the House Commerce Committee. This bill requires that municipalities charge consumers in another municipality the same rates, fees, and charges as those within their own boundaries under specific circumstances. So essentially what it's trying to do is it's trying to make a, equitable practice of charging citizens within your boundaries and citizens outside your boundaries the same rates. So, for example, if you have a plant in your boundary as well as in the outside of the boundary, the ideal would be both areas gets charged the same, because it's not so much of a burden that you're providing those utilities outside the boundary if you already have a plant there or whatnot. One last thing that is added to the bill is that public hearings are required to change the rates unless the changes are made across all service classes.
Thanks, Peter. Appreciate the update on that one. While we're kind of on the topic, I do want to talk about sewer laterals. I got a lot of feedback on Senate Bill 1208 by Senator Truenow from our county folks on the ground, various water and sewer departments that had some concerns with the program mandate in this bill. Specifically, it requires an inspection of all sewer laterals in the jurisdiction and potentially a repair program as well if a given lateral does not meet certain performance standards. And some of the concerns we heard are that, the lateral portion is not actually, public jurisdiction. We have jurisdiction over the public sewer main, but this bill requires us to inspect all the way to the house. So this is essentially private property that we would be inspecting and then also responsible to repair as needed. So what we're essentially looking at is we're basically doubling the service area for our public utilities here. That's a pretty big cost burden, and when you kind of combine that with a 7-year interval to actually conduct these programs, that's asking a lot, especially because a number of our public utilities already conduct routine inspections, typically on a 20-year cycle as part of their DEP permitting for their wastewater systems. But again, what we're doing here is doubling the service area and kind of trimming the time for us to actually conduct these inspections. And so that is a recipe for, a sizable cost burden. We did bring these concerns to Senator Turnow as well as the House sponsor. And additionally, I went up and testified on the bill just to, thank the sponsor for hearing our concerns, but letting him know that, we would like to see some work on this bill going forward. But did just want to thank everybody who responded and gave us comment on this bill. Keep it up. You guys are kind of the lifeblood of what we're doing up here, and it really helps to, have eyes and ears on the ground. So thank you all for that. The other pattern we kind of saw from some of the comments we got was that the bill requires some pretty prescriptive techniques for actually conducting these inspections and repairs. And, having spoke to a number of people on the ground, there didn't seem to be a ton of consensus that these were necessarily more cost-effective than what's currently being done in our local utility jurisdictions. And so that's something to monitor as well. But again, just wanted to put this on your radar. And if anyone else has comments, please feel free to reach out.
In other news, over on the Growth Management Department, we have seen quite a few bills this week talking about alternative plans reviews and inspections, and also building permits. Starting with the alternative plans reviews and inspections portion, on the House side, Representative Benaroche, and on the Senate side, Senator Colaudiud are both running the single trade inspection bills. Currently, single trade inspections do already exist in statute, having to do with things like HVAC and water heaters and sprinkler replacements. What this bill does is it now adds solar energy and energy storage installators to this description. It also adds single trade plan reviews and defines that in statute as any plan review focused on a single contracting trade. In addition to that, the bill also adds that a private provider may use any automated or software plans review program to determine if the single trade plan complies with building code. And this also reduces the permit time from 20 days to 5 days for the local government to permit this type of work. So we are seeing the private provider statute open up here. Hopefully we are going to keep this down to solar energy, and that's all I can ask for.
Yeah, Courtney, I think what we would say is that this is kind of the tip of the iceberg as far as the growth management sphere this session. They're coming after it hard, and we're battling this on a lot of different fronts here.
Yeah, and with that, Rep. Esposito presented House Bill 1035, which provides that a building permit application for the construction or renovation of a single-family dwelling is deemed approved upon submission if the construction of the dwelling is in a jurisdiction for which a state of emergency was issued within the preceding 24 months.
So you mean the whole state?
Yes, the whole state. With this, we then have to give that building permit within 2 days if a licensed architect or engineer signs and seals the application and attests that the plans comply with the Florida Building Code. The huge issue that we have with this right now is, that Jared brought it up, it's 2-day building permits for the entire state.
Yeah, I mean, in the last 24 months,
right,
the
in the
entire
last
state
24
has been
months.
under a declared state of emergency.
Correct.
So.
The other problem that we have with this is that there is no backstop for local government to really look at these plans and make sure that they are okay. Before committee, she did add an amendment to the bill that provides that a local government may not require a building permit for work that is valued $7,500 or less for single-family dwellings. The second part of this, though, is that the local government must approve or deny a building permit application for work which is valued less than $1,500 on an existing single-family dwelling in 5 days after receiving an application. So once again, common theme this year, lowering those shot clocks, getting people their building permits, and we just want to make sure that people are going to be safe in whatever they are developing. So we're going to see how this plays out this year, but it is one very big theme.
Courtney, yeah, I just want to go back real quick. There is that infamous landmine that we just hate so much in there. It's that deemed approved language that we have seen for a couple years running now. And, you know, I think we just don't like the idea that things will ever default to being approved without kind of that final county local building department sign off. And again, I think we can sort of appreciate the spirit of this bill. You know, we obviously have every kind of vested interest in getting, you know, people back in their homes following a natural disaster. But, you know, we are kind of the ones responsible for the technical aspects of this, and that really lends itself back to public safety. So, yeah, thank you for that update, Courtney. And, you know, we'll be on top of this one going forward. And you know, we spoke to her about, you know, deemed approved last year. And, you know, hopefully the representative, you know, will accommodate us again as far as getting that language out. Now, before we go, I did just want to give a quick update on our two kind of omnibus packages that we're seeing. And, you know, the 120-page Rural Renaissance package and the 120-page DAX agency package are now both up to over 150 pages each. You know, these are absolute, you know, beasts of a bill. And we saw the Rural Renaissance package, kind of as we expected, get fast-tracked through the Senate. It's one of the first bills to, you know, actually pass the chamber so far, and it did pass on the Senate floor unanimously. I believe it was yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. Again, that was Senate President Ben Albritton's priority. And, you know, we're kind of expecting the funding within this bill to be, you know, at the top of his trade list. So it'll be interesting to see, you know, kind of what he's willing to give at the negotiating table with House Speaker Danny Perez when it comes down to, you know, tying up the loose ends at the end of session here. The DAX package also moved in the House this week with kind of a new look. It did get a makeover in which they took out some of the solar language like we were expecting, and it had already been done on the Senate side. What they did add back into the bill is the agricultural worker housing language that we saw in a standalone bill that passed the legislature last year but ultimately got vetoed by the governor. The governor felt that there was not enough protection for, you know, legal verification of these workers within the language of the bill. That has now been tightened. And this is one that FAC came to the negotiating table on last year. And I think how we kind of looked at it was, if we're going to get preempted on our land use authority here, we wanted to make sure there were basic sanitation, landscaping, and aesthetic, you know, standards in place. As of the time of recording, that's all we kind of had for you guys, but we'll keep an eye out as these new calendars are popping up. With that being said, I think that just about wraps us up. Again, thank you for listening, and thank you to all our commissioners who made the trip up to Tallahassee, Leon County, to, you know, support, you know, our county priorities here at the legislature. It means so much, and we really appreciate you guys. With that being said, we are signing off, and we will see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.